Quesadilla, that's a word that you never see the English translation for. You never see that in English, you know? They just keep it in Spanish. I guess because maybe it's too awkward or something. You know, like, and for you, sir, I will have the queso, cheese, female, small, please. One little cheese girl for me, that'd be great. I feel like they could bring fajitas out from the kitchen a little bit later. There's a lot of showboating going on with fajitas.
Hello! Coming to you live from a hotel room in Poughkeepsie, New York, because guess what? I'm fully vaccinated, so I've been taking little one-night road trips in the New York State, Connecticut, Rhode Island, New Jersey area. It's so nice. It's so nice, and I hope you guys out there are getting vaccinated, taking care of yourselves, taking care of your neighbors. Oh, what a time, right? Today we're going to be talking about one of my first favorite comedians ever. We're talking about Demetri Martin, who's sort of a complicated guy in comedy history. So let's go back a step here. On my website, if you want to send me an email, one of the fields that I made required was favorite comedian when I was building my site, because I thought that that was sort of funny. So that truly, if anyone wants to email me, whether that's, you know, a fan or a friend or a business inquiry or something, they have to tell me their favorite comedian first, which really just makes me laugh. Obviously, it's not something to take too seriously. But someone reached out to me a bit ago and they put Demetri Martin, and when I saw it, I just got this like wave of flashback of listening to These Are Jokes way too many times. He was also the first comedian that I ever saw live, way back at Maryland when my brother was a student there in 2009, 10, something like that. Not sure. Anyway, he's a comedian you don't hear about as often anymore, and I think that's because he was part of a very specific time in comedy history when he was at his peak in popularity, and I hear a lot of negative things about him from the more clubby type of comedians. He has this sort of intellectual dilettante quality about him. Dry, cerebral, and unthreatening. He sometimes plays music with his stand-up, and he sometimes has a large pad and lots of other props, and props can be really easy to deride and can be seen as something that takes away from stand-up, but he uses those things in a really smart way that really enhances the type of stand-up that he likes to perform.
These are some of my jokes that didn't work the first time around, but I think it's because I didn't convey the picture that was in my head, the visual that I was trying to communicate to the audience. But I think with these material enhancers, they might work.
And for the uninitiated, Demetri Martin doesn't do traditional stand-up comedy like you might be used to if you mainly listen to comedians, you know, like Dave Chappelle or Bill Burr or that type of comic. Instead, he tells short jokes and one-liners in the vein of comedians like Steven Wright or Mitch Hedberg or really any comedian before like 1955.
I read that last year MTV's Real World got 40,000 applications. That's amazing, man. Such an even number. You would think it would be 40,008, maybe.
He has a habit of bringing, let's say, his hobbies on stage with him. So that can include a large pad of his drawings, a guitar, a harmonica, poems, three-dimensional crosswords or palindromes or puzzles that he made himself, clothes that he sewed for the show, all that sort of stuff.
Useless talents. When they came out with the Phillips head screwdriver, I wonder if the guy who did the flathead was like, what? We can get credit for this? Shit.
Frankly, I think Demetri Martin is one of the most sharp and intelligent comedians of the last 2 decades or so. It's sort of similar to Steve Martin, who we talked about on the channel recently, right? Because he's more than just a stand-up telling jokes. He has all of this other schnaz going on at the same time. But he does it in a very different way, because Steve Martin up on stage is really about momentum, right? He's trying and failing and flailing around, and he does one thing and he throws it in the air and he goes and does another thing. Demetri Martin is not a momentum-based comedian, really at all. He sort of reminds me as like a kid playing show and tell. You know, he'll take something and he'll show it to you and then he'll put it away and he'll bring out the next thing, right? It just sort of rolls along.
Go. Good for you. Yeah, yeah. Hurry. Why?
I think it's really easy to forget about the Demetris of the world when we talk about stand-up, because we really like this idea of comedians as truth tellers, you know, as people who like storytelling and people who like art and craft, and there's also just comedians like Demetri that like puzzles.
You know what I snuck into class? Puzzle books. Like this. Mensa presents Mighty Mindbusters.
And that's a totally like valid part of stand-up, but when we talk about how comedians are all tortured artists, we need to remember that there's also Demetri Martin.
If a crab and a half weigh 1.5 pounds, but the half crab weighs as much again as the whole crab, what do half the whole crab and the whole of the half crab weigh?
Yeah, baby.
His approach to jokes is very puzzle-like. You know, every setup has a punchline out there. He told the New York Times, often a punchline will be the solution to a puzzle, to the little deconstruction or meditation on something. And if the audience laughs, it's a solved problem. For a quick snapshot of who he is as a comedian, here's one of my favorite Demetri Martin jokes.
We were doing a roofing job on the top of a 40-story building. And while we were up there, Billy started getting depressed and he started talking crazy. Then he went up onto the ledge and he said he was going to jump. It was too late and I couldn't stop him. He jumped off the building. Right after he jumped, I looked down and noticed that Trampoline Emporium was having a sidewalk sale that day. He landed on one of the trampolines and bounced back up. And just as he got to the level of where I was standing, he said, "You know, I think a lot of your joke premises are very contrived and hard to believe."
Man, thinking back on when I saw him live, Mike Birbiglia is the guy that opened for him. Crazy. Yeah, Mulaney and Birbiglia used to open for him. It's easy to imagine gruffer, you know, road comics or club comics, you know, like guys that would hang out at the Cellar. It's easy to imagine them not having a lot of time or energy for a comedian like Demetri Martin. There's a story of him being at the Cellar once and Mark Maron is there. Of course it's Maron, angry comedy dad Mark Maron, and Demetri shows up and he's got his skateboard and he's got his large pad with him and his guitar, and Maron's just like, "Hey Demetri, why don't you try writing some jokes? Like, you need all this shit to be funny." But the ironic thing about that is, pound for pound, Demetri Martin's average set is probably 10 times the amount of jokes that the average Mark Maron said. It just looks and feels a little bit differently. And if you pay attention to what Demetri's doing, all of that shit is not replacing jokes, it's augmenting jokes, and it's allowing jokes to diversify. And I get it, it's easy to make fun of Demetri Martin. It's easy to make fun of people who invest maybe too much in appearing smart. Trust me, I know. But I think it's a mistake to get caught up in all of the business that surrounds Demetri Martin, because he's a really wonderful comic.
I don't know why, but if somebody's smelling something and they also close their eyes while they're doing it, I just want to smack them in the face.
It's fascinating because he didn't really start doing just jokes. He did a lot of that in New York, but he also did these really long, involved one-man shows that got into heavy emotions and personal storytelling and emotional insight and all of these things that we don't associate with him at all nowadays. A lot of those weren't recorded, unfortunately. Like, I've heard him talk about a show called Spiral Bound that he did that I would give anything to see if anyone knows anything, but I think it's just lost. But his show If I, which is in that same vein, is all live on YouTube, and I think it's one of my favorite Demetri Martin specials, period. It's somewhere in between stand-up and a one-man show, but I'm not really one for labels, so call it whatever you want. Basically, it's a show where he talks about his life, he talks about his brain, and he talks about a lot of the impulses that he has to create and to solve puzzles and to try, and it's really just sort of an hour with Demetri Martin's brain. He talks about some of the patterns that he gets himself caught in and how he's trying to be the person that he wants to be. There's a lot about his marriage, where most people don't even know he was divorced at a young age. A lot of how he became the person that he is.
I'm a guy who's obsessed with palindromes. To give you an idea what I'm talking about, here's one of my notebooks. One ride on the subway yielded this in one of my notebooks. This is me working it out. Yeah, you see, I'm figuring them out. When I come up with a good one, I put a box around it so I can use the palindrome later for something.
Again, all of this stuff that would come as a total shock to you if you just saw his modern shit.
Even when I walk down the street, things look a little different. The signs, the letters dance around. It's like it becomes a little puzzle for me. So, say Mobil, the gas station, becomes Limbo. Starbucks becomes Rack's Bust. Car phone warehouse. Ah, one sour crap. Wee.
And he learned a ton. I think he enjoyed doing these shows, but he felt a little constrained by having to tell a big story. If you have an arc, if you have a story that you want to tell people, you gotta stick to it. But if you're just doing joke, 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 you have a freedom, and that's something that he really wants and really appreciates. Man, I love like storytellers and angry prophets and all of that stuff, but it's hard to beat just a really good joke teller, you know? Someone like Mitch or Rodney Dangerfield, when they just hit home run after home run. Jeselnik's another one who can do it really well when he's on. And man, I just am in awe of these people.
So I get off the plane and I forgot to undo my seatbelt and I'm pulling the plane through the terminal. And the wings are knocking people over. And then I almost broke both my arms trying to hold open a revolving door for a woman.
First of all, how do you even memorize that many jokes? Like, let alone write them all. It's fantastic. Imagine you're Demetri Martin and you have 200 jokes that you've written and you want to put those on an album and send it out. Now, he's smart enough to know that it's very unlikely that that will be as compelling as he wants it to be. If the audience is just sitting there joke, 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 first of all, they're never going to remember where their favorite jokes are, it's going to get confusing, and it's going to get a little monotonous. You know, there are comedians who can do it successfully, who really put a lot of sauce on it, you know, but Demetri is very even-keeled and his jokes are very dry. So in order to keep you interested, he peppers in all of these other things. You know, there are some jokes he'll tell with the guitar in the background, and the jokes are no different than the jokes without a guitar. There's nothing about them that needs the guitar, but it's a way to break up some of the silence, and it's a way to keep it consistently interesting.
I love playing guitar. I find it very relaxing, you know. I actually started with guitar quite a while ago as a street performer. It was hard because I was in the suburbs.
He also does something that I love that I can't believe we don't see more of, and I think comedians are missing because it's such a strong tool. He just brings up a friend to narrate, or he, you know, brings up a friend to kind of roast him in the background. There's one track with Leo Allen, and there's one track with Will Forte, and they're similar in some ways but very different, and it works, I think, so well. It creates a sort of club environment, and I would love to see more of this. I think it's hilarious and really effective.
The straw is your friend until you lose eye contact with the straw. Then he will betray you and make you look like an idiot. Through the art of mime, Demetri made it look like he was struggling with the straw, which caused us to emotionally connect to the joke.
Jokes with a guitar is a little more common, right? And I'm not talking about songs. That's sort of its own thing, but just telling jokes while strumming a guitar. You know, when we think of comedians doing that, you can think of the like rim shot, the bottom ching at the end, or like Henny Youngman playing the fiddle, violin. I don't know which one he called it. It's the same instrument. Playing the fiddle or the violin in between punchlines, but this is just sort of like strumming while telling jokes. Nick Thune does it sometimes, and I don't know. I like it. It creates a sort of mood. And also just fills the silence. Stand-up is so much about managing silence correctly.
These pants are 3/4 Roy's and 1/4 mine. He's a friend of mine. We split our clothes. And he's a great guy.
So I told you guys at the beginning that I made this video because a few weeks ago someone told me that Demetri Martin was their favorite stand-up, and it got my wheels turning about Demetri again. So I actually reached out to them. They're a comedian in Denver. I asked them a little bit about why Demetri Martin is their favorite, and I wanted to get a comic's perspective on what Demetri Martin is doing on stage, because I'm a comedy journalist, I can tell you about the history, but I'm not a stand-up, so sometimes it's nice to get a comedian's perspective on a comic. Everyone say hi to Dan O.
Hello everybody, I am Dan O. I just want to give a huge shout out to Katie. Thank you so much for having me on the video. That's fantastic. I've been a fan of her channel for a while, and now I get to talk about my favorite comedian, Demetri Martin. And yes, just like she was saying, I am a comic and I'm here in Denver. I've been doing comedy for the last 4 or 5 years now, and Demetri has been my favorite since I was very young. And I know I only look like I'm 19 now, but since I was even younger than that, I've been a fan of Demetri. So what makes me qualified to talk about comedy? Katie's a journalist, I'm a comic that's been doing it for 5 years. That's a fair point. There's a few things I think. And besides my glasses, firstly, I am just obsessed with this art form. I love breaking down comedy to the point where some people don't think it's funny anymore, but I've found that I'm able to appreciate stand-up comedy more if I know how it's done. And also, if you're a fan of this channel, you know that Katie already has great taste, so I don't know, maybe this is only the first time she misses. But on to Demetri, the actual reason for this video. If you've ever seen him perform, you know that what he's doing is not easy to replicate. He's truly a one-of-a-kind. Seinfeld once said something about if a comic actually wants to capture an audience's attention, they should walk around the stage and pace as much as possible. But what's great about Demetri is that he's basically doing the exact opposite. He's just standing in place, and it's like his posture is as monotone as his voice. But it just works. Demetri is not a physical comedian by any means. The most I've ever seen him move around in a joke is this cherry tomato joke.
I think based on their behavior, it seems like cherry tomatoes are not really interested in participating in the salad. I've noticed. I try to get one, it's like, whoa, look out, watch out, whoa, I don't think so, whoa.
It's almost like he's saying, don't just pay attention to me, pay attention to what I'm saying. And I've always loved that about his comedy. Adding to what Katie said as well, as far as him not being a storyteller, which is true, he is not a traditional storyteller by any means, it is still interesting to see the deliberate choice he makes as far as what jokes are put in what order. Like if he has 4 food jokes, you're probably going to hear them in sequence. As far as stage specifics and performance patterns go, Demetri loves to personify things. This is a tool that he uses pretty frequently actually. But it's really interesting because it gives us a lot of insight as to how we might see the world. If one person has had so many interactions with inanimate objects, it's not only a testament to their creativity, but like Katie was saying, their puzzle solving skills. He sort of sees the world as just a group of objects, but they have a thing to say and he just needs to listen to it. He's also incredibly proficient in basic joke structure as well. Like he can take a classic, how come this works here but doesn't work here formula and turn it on its head, which is always just really fun to watch. But one of my favorite things to look for in Demetri's comedy is how economical he is with his words.
I have an L-shaped sofa, lowercase.
He loves a short joke. That's not really a surprise. He's known as a one-liner comic. But if you're a comic and you're trying to learn how to cut excess off of your own material, Demetri's fantastic to study in that regard.
It seems like there's a fine line between having a pet and having a hostage from a different species. You go to somebody's house, they're like, close the door, he'll get out. Close the door, he'll get out.
Demetri is also a criminally underrated performer. Which sounds weird to say because I just talked about how he goes on stage, doesn't move around a lot, and then talks in a monotone voice the entire time. I get that, it looks easy, but the way that I see it is that he is going out and performing in front of hundreds, if not thousands of people night after night. And the ability to remain that calm and stay as poised as he does is tremendously difficult. So yes, he is a brilliant performer. But what's most impressive about Demetri Martin is that for as much material as he has, it doesn't feel like we know a whole lot about him. Katie already talked about it, but If I, his 2002 special, is really as personal as we've ever seen him. Which means that for 20 years, he's been playing the harmonica and talking about road signs. And I don't know if people also realize how difficult it is not to talk about yourself, especially if your job is to go out and talk about yourself. So we might not know an entire lot about him, but we know a lot about how he sees the world and that he likes to play with words and that everything is a puzzle and that inanimate objects speak to him, and that's just as interesting to me. And again, thanks to Katie for having me on the video. This is awesome. I got to talk about Demetri Martin. This is my absolute favorite comedian, and it only took 60 takes, so that's not bad.
I was at a party the other night and I saw a guy wearing a leather jacket. And I thought, that is cool. Like 10 minutes later, I saw a guy wearing a leather vest. And I thought, that is not cool. And that's when I realized that cool is all about leather sleeves.
This could get into a weird place, but Demetri Martin is a totally underrepresented personality in stand-up comedy. And that is the, like, nerd overachiever type.
Socratic method, that's what we have in American law schools. Mr. Martin, state the facts in the case Bowers v. Hardwick, and just calls on you. Such a power play. I said, this is not for me.
He went to Yale for undergrad, he was a history major, and he went to NYU for law school, and I think he dropped out like a year before graduating. Editing Katie can double check that. He dropped out and he was like, this isn't for me. I'm not in love with this. I'm gonna go be a stand-up. And goddamn, thank goodness. So he just thinks about the world differently than most comedians that you're gonna encounter. And that's so important because being a stand-up comedian is a lot about making people listen to you and having something worth saying. And so if you're thinking about the world in a very different way than almost everyone else on that lineup, then that's gonna just make you a little bit more inherently interesting. I'm not here to stereotype comedians, but let's just say he's not the norm. And some people might not want to hear this because yes, being funny is most often the most important thing about being a good stand-up, right? Being funny. It seems obvious. Of course, you just have to get up there and be funny and you'll be great, kid. But unfortunately, it's more complicated than that. And I think there's a lot of time where being a compelling person is just as, if not more, important than being funny. We cannot overlook the importance of charm and likability.
People get so mad when you run and try to catch the elevator. You can't get over how angry they get. What they really hate is when you run and catch it and you go, just want to say, hey everybody, have a good ride, okay?
A lot of comedians spend a lot of time doing an impression of what they think stand-up comedy sounds like. And that's no dig on them. It's really goddamn hard. And you gotta start just by sort of feeling it out. And it takes a while to find your voice. And hopefully you will eventually find what makes you different than the other people on the lineup, right? But Demetri Martin has really zeroed in on that and he knows it to a T. And I think sometimes that can be to his detriment because there have been a few specials that seem a little indistinguishable from the others. I think in the mid-2010s he lost me a bit because it just didn't seem anything fresh, but I want to tell you about how he got me back. Yeah, I remember having sort of fallen off, and I remember watching one of his specials, this one, I don't remember the name off the top of my head, and I was just like, kind of disappointed by it. And that was also during a time when that style wasn't as in vogue anymore. You know, like nerds had their day in the sun when superhero movies were like first kicking up. Now they're so mainstream that it's not even nerd culture anymore. You know, Chris Hardwick and that like nerd boy moment, right? Sort of crested. And stand-up had become more about confessional stand-up, more of what it is now, more about, you know, tell me about your dead dad type of stand-up. Nothing making fun of dead dad stand-up, but there's a lot of it. So he had sort of fallen out of vogue with the type of comedy that was the most popular. And I remember I was on my way to see him doing The Overthinker live in New York. He was still on that tour. I was seeing him at the Gramercy. And I remember talking to my friend and saying, I hope he's still Demetri, but I hope he attempts one really long story. Because I'd love to see him try and flex that muscle, and damn it if he didn't do it. And I was so proud of him. I remember walking out of the show and being like, yes, he did it. He tells this really great story about toast, basically.
They bring our food out, I get all my stuff. She doesn't get her toast. So she's looking, the manager comes over, says, everything okay? She said, I ordered the gluten-free toast, you know, and I haven't gotten it. My eggs are getting cold. He's like, okay. Now here's where the story picks up. He goes, Brian.
And I think he did a fantastic job, and I was really excited to see him try, you know?
A few minutes later, I see my wife make a face I've never seen her make before. So I look where she's looking, and there's Brian. He's come out of the kitchen with my wife's piece of toast in his hand.
Because he's made enough, successful enough, that he could do his same shtick for the rest of his life if he wanted to. Shtick.
He's just making his way through the crowded restaurant, just holding the one piece of toast, coming. And now I've never had this experience before, seeing a grown man carry a piece of toast bareback through a restaurant. Just kind of...
And you know, podcasting is a big part of this. He's never been on that many pods. He's been on like 2 where I've heard him talk about himself and his life. Podcasts really fed into this desire that a lot of comedy fans and comedy nerds have to be in the room where things are happening, to know the backstage secrets, to feel like they're in the green room, and to be privy to the conversations that comedians are having, right? And that's something that just doesn't come naturally to Demetri Martin. And this is one of the problems with stand-up comedy right now, is it is incredibly trend dependent in ways that other art forms don't have to be, because there's not really delineated genres. I don't want to get up on my whole genre soapbox again because I've talked about this enough, but I think if there were more delineated genres and more room for different types of stand-up without having to immediately, you know, be called alt and put in this little corner away from like real stand-up, which is I can't even get into why that's lame. But if there was more room for that, then comedians, I don't think, would feel so beholden to what was popular in stand-up. And I think that that is a real detriment to comedians like Demetri Martin, who might just sort of not fit. "I'm not snarky," he once said. "I can't pull that off well. I'm always a little bit more earnest," which you can get into trouble for. You can be cheesy, a dork, but it's still a risk I feel comfortable taking. So if you haven't explored much Demetri Martin, I really advise you to take a look and see what he's doing. It might not be your cup, or it might not be what you think your cup is, but it's always rad to see someone doing something interesting with the form. And while I'm inclined to say it's something like new, it's truly the oldest style we really have in stand-up. It's like OG Catskills vaudeville, and that's pretty rad. And more than that, he's doing the stuff that he finds the most interesting. And I respect the hell out of that in anyone.
I went to the beach yesterday. There are all these people lying out getting suntans. I like suntans, but I'm more into sunburns. Because the sunburn tells a story. Like, hey, that guy likes V-necks.
Big thanks to Dano for helping with this video. Everyone go check him out. I'll link his podcast down below. And he also has a pretty great TikTok where he talks about comedy history. So check him out, he's wonderful. And thank you so much. Support live comedy if you can do so safely. Otherwise, you know, we'll be there soon. Be patient, be smart, be safe, take care of each other. And I'll talk to you soon. Okay, bye.